First, I'd like to thank everyone here for taking time away from what I realize are very busy schedules to join us for the day. Those of you who have come in previous years or who know me at all know I'm not one for lengthy introductions. Nonetheless, before I turn things over to Laurie Tisch, Deputy Mayor Gibbs, and the rest of the speakers, I want to say just a few words on what the Social Enterprise Program is and what motivated us to organize the event this morning. The goal of the Social Enterprise Program at Columbia is to advance our understanding of how business and management practice can help to improve society. And one of the main ways that we do this is by fostering the creation and exchange of new ideas. And you can think of this morning's event as kind of emblematic of the ways that we encourage innovation in the social enterprise space in this way. Now, this morning, we've brought together, and I must say my heart is beating a little less quickly now that I see that the room is full. We've brought together a large and varied mix of social enterprise leaders in New York City. And I think importantly, what we've tried to do is bring together a group of people who come at the problem of poverty and figuring out solutions from a very wide range of perspectives. And what we hope is that by taking you away from the day-to-day pressures of running an organization, is that you'll walk away from this morning's discussion with a few new insights, a few new ways of looking at the world, and equally important, the conversations that you have around the tables will lead to some new connections to continue this conversation into the future. I'd now like to turn the floor over to Laurie Tisch, who will say a few words about why she's chosen to support this event, and what she hopes to get out of it. And then I'll come back to say a few words of introduction for Linda.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you so much, Ray. Unfortunately, I'm known for really long comments, but fortunately for all of you, I have a little bit of laryngitis, so they're not going to be too long. But first, I would like to thank Columbia and Robin Hood for convening this conference. I actually have long-standing relationship both with Columbia. I'm vice chairman at Teachers College, a couple of blocks up, and my family and I have a very long-standing relationship with Robin Hood, so much so that my daughter, who is getting married next year, has registered at Robin Hood. So, we're very, very impressed with the work of Robin Hood. And like many members in my family, I've been active in philanthropy for quite some time, and like all of you in the room, I've found it to be both an exhilarating experience and often a sobering experience. Exhilarating because I do believe in the power of philanthropy to change and enhance lives. Sobering because, as we all know, these are really big issues with no easy answers. And sometimes the metrics and the outcomes aren't exactly what we would like, but I do believe we have to keep trying and keep looking for different ways to get the results that we're looking for. Needless to say, poverty is a huge issue, and there's no magic wands to make it go away, but I applaud Columbia and everybody here for looking at new ways to attack this issue, to understand it, and hopefully to make even more inroads. Just a little bit about my own foundation, the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund, which I started in 4 years ago in 2007. And both my original director, Gail Nayowith, is here. Gail, thank you. And new director, Rick Lufglass. And I really applaud, and we all can, but Gail and Rick and Melissa Berman, who we've worked with as a consultant, for getting the foundation up and running, and I'm in a position to fund conferences like this. The foundation's purpose and aim is to support innovative programs and partnerships that have a lasting effect, especially on the well-being of individuals and communities in New York City. Our mission, our stated mission, is to expand access and opportunity. Now, obviously, that's a very broad mission. As we often say, who starts a foundation to limit access and opportunity? But for us, it's finding very specific strategies to help level the playing field for all New Yorkers, whether it's access to healthy food, the arts, education, jobs, or health care. One of the key focus areas of the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund is food and nutrition. In 2008, Mayor Bloomberg and Linda Gibbs, Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, invited us to be the launch partner for the Department of Health's New York City Green Card Initiative. This program is bold and innovative, and the strategy of the program was to create new mobile vending permits for entrepreneurs to sell fresh fruits and vegetables in targeted neighborhoods where there are few retail options for healthy foods, areas where the rates of diabetes, obesity, and other diet-related diseases are disproportionately high. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you compare the Upper East Side to Harlem, just a couple of blocks north, you'll see stark differences in the availability of healthy foods, and these differences correlate to disparities in disease rates and poverty. For example, in East Harlem, there are fewer supermarkets with fresh produce, more bodegas, and more fast food restaurants. And a survey that was done by the Department of Health showed that food stores in the Upper East Side were more than 3 times likely to carry healthier foods like fresh fruits and low-fat dairy products than their counterparts just a couple of blocks up in Harlem. If you also look at health statistics like diabetes, you'll find that on the Upper East Side, approximately 3% of adults have diabetes, and this number is 13% in Harlem. Same with obesity. Upper East Side, 9%. East Harlem, over 30%. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise that the neighborhoods where these health disparities are disproportionately high are also those neighborhoods where there are high rates of poverty. Again, on the Upper East Side, 6% of people live below the poverty line. In East Harlem, that figure is over 30%. We all know that there are many factors that influence how people eat, what they choose to eat, and there are some factors that we can't do anything about. But the one thing we do know is that without access to healthy foods, a nutritious diet and good health is nearly impossible. So the New York City Green Card Initiative was an experimental strategy which used small-scale entrepreneurship as a means to improve access to healthy food. And as I said, we partner with the city, and I think it's a great example of a public-private partnership. The mayor, Linda Gibbs, and her colleagues should be very proud of the results. There are now about 500 green cards in these neighborhoods, and that translates to 500 new access points to the availability of fresh fruits and vegetables. Other cities are now jumping in and are starting mobile vending programs of their own, but no city, needless to say, no city has nearly the breadth and scale that New York has. The program has also been an innovative way to create economic opportunity. Each card is individually owned, and by last count, the program has created more than 800 jobs. So today's social enterprise program is all about innovative and promising strategies like the New York City Green Card Initiative. It's about building a collective understanding of how change happens. Ultimately, it's about creativity, hope, optimism, and perseverance. As I said, my fund is called the Illumination Fund, and which is we see today's forum as a metaphor for illuminating minds and sparking opportunities. So thank you again for inviting me to participate. And Ray, back to Ray.
So if it sounds a little ridiculous to start a foundation for the purpose of limiting opportunities, in a somewhat similar vein, it might sound a little ridiculous to start an organization with the purpose of failing. That said, if you're never failing as an organization, and perhaps more importantly, if we never observe failure as a collective social enterprise community, we're probably not taking enough risks. So I'd now like to turn things over to Deputy Mayor Gibbs to talk about the critical importance of failure.
Good morning, everybody. When I proposed this as the title, my staff said, "Oh, Linda, do you have to do that? It's like, why do you have to send such a bad vibe?" But I thought about it, and I thought it really gets to the heart of why we're able to innovate as much as we are, and the mayor tolerates this. I thought I have the greatest. I talked to him a lot about evaluation and research, but the greatest story or sort of just little conversation that we had that I think is sort of the microcosm of sort of his disposition that allows us to take these kind of risks is he was talking about a ski trip that he had just come back on. And he says, at the end of the day, one of the group came in and she said, "I didn't fall once today." And he says, "Huh." And I thought, you didn't fall once, that means you're not trying hard enough, right? I said, oh, there it is. There's that little glimmer of why he's willing to put up with us doing the kind of work that we do, which by definition includes failure, because we're taking risks, we're trying new things, and importantly, we're doing it with the overlay and context of evaluation so that we know if things are working or not. And so maybe the more positive title for this would have been something along the lines of innovation and progress in social service delivery, but the other side of that title is that you've got to be willing to fail and to talk about your failures as part of the process of learning. It's like I know very well maybe half the people in the room. I kind of know the other half. So I'm going to give you the truncated version of my comments because I think probably we'll learn more by having a conversation, and we'll leave as much of the time for questions and conversation, none of which will involve anything about budget cuts. I know. Yeah. So I thought it's good to just reflect on where we are. In many ways, I think of where we are now nationally in our social safety net and anti-poverty work is what might be characterized as sort of a post-dependency era. The welfare reform of the mid-1990s brought huge changes to all of the major programs that support people in poverty in our country, and there's plenty of examples where in some places more than others it's either gone too far or we're seeing some fraying, and we need to come back and address those. But overwhelmingly, when folks look back at all of those changes, I think we see a consensus that there was success. That we went from a period with very high levels of dependency and a number of social programs that were actually discouraging work and discouraging individuals from leaving the public benefits and taking employment. Things like the fact that if you took a job, you could lose more than for every dollar in earnings, you could lose more than $1 in public benefits. You take a job, you could lose all your health insurance. You take a job and you wouldn't get supported with child care. And so from the welfare reform era, we had the negative incentives, the penalties associated with time limits and stricter enforcement of rules, but the positive incentives of very strong investments in childcare and strong investments in the Earned Income Tax Credit, the largest anti-poverty program that this country has. And so looking at that, there were successes. What you saw in the data is that the individuals who were the beneficiaries of that went from unemployment rates so this is basically women with children, custodial moms who were the benefits of the TANF program, went from unemployment rates that were in the mid-40 range to, employment rates in the mid-40 range to employment rates in the mid-60 5% range. And so a huge jump up in employment, and the important thing, a big drop in child poverty. And so you saw that that was leading to increased earnings and increased household income and supports. When you married that with reforms in the welfare systems that allowed people, that you gradually tapered off the public benefit programs, you allowed the health insurance programs to continue as you were earning income, and you introduced the EITC as a big incentive and added reward on top of the income, you saw huge shifts in behavior, huge shifts in income, and big drops in child poverty. And so looking at that, the thing that in the next generation of conversation that we looked at this and we're thinking about the status of poverty, and this is now at the beginning of the mayor's second term when I came over to City Hall in my current job, and we talked about, what's next? We've kind of hit a plateau. All of those reforms had taken place, and there really wasn't a conversation going on, not much of a conversation, quite frankly, about poverty nationally, and not many new approaches and new ideas. And so the mayor talked to me about his desire to look more deeply into the nature of poverty and to find the next new ideas. And let's start experimenting. Let's start thinking about what's going to change the trajectory from where we have it now. And that led to a set of initiatives that came out of the recommendations of a commission that he established to look into this issue. And so we came up, we focused on three key populations, the early childhood years, 0 to 5. And here was an example where we had great evidence of what works and not much replication of some of those ideas. So how can we actually take the evidence of where we have established practice and bring it more fully into the environment? The second category was the working poor. And so while we saw a big increase in employment, we also saw a huge increase in those who were working and still below the poverty line. So the question is, okay, we got them one foot in the door with employment. What do we have to do in order to help them to move up, to advance through work and income so that they can move above the poverty line to greater self-sufficiency? And the third population were young adults, 16 to 24-year-old disconnected youth. And this one is interesting. One of my closest colleagues in the work that we've done, Gordon Berlin at MDRC, I called him up. I said, here's our target groups. This is what we're thinking. Give me your honest answer. And so he went through and he explained the pros and cons. And then we got to the young adults. And he said, hey, listen, this is a population where there is very little. It's so frustrating. It's so important. It's really critical. But there's just very little that is proven to work. And so if you take this on, just know that your chances of success are slim. And it's really important, but just be ready for failure, because this is an area where there isn't much of that evidence base that you see in the other areas, and it's going to be really tough to do. And so we committed to those things, and we had developed a set of agendas. All of this for the important point that many of you know. I think one of the smartest things we did was to create a Center for Economic Opportunity. We took the Commission for Economic Opportunity and turned it into a center, brought on a professional staff of individuals, and we spent money on evaluation. Evaluation is expensive. It's not only hard to do, it's not only messy, it introduces all kinds of complications into the environment, but it also costs a lot of money. And not a lot of people want to pay for the evaluation. And so we took a good portion of the resources that the mayor committed to this, and from our foundation partners, including Robin Hood, thank you, and Rockefeller and STAR, and a number of foundations we were collaborating with to invest in evaluation of the programs that we were doing and developing a professional capacity to do that. And so at this point now, 6 years later, our Center for Economic Opportunity has become our brain center that has put this evaluation over the programs, helped us to figure out what works and what doesn't, but interestingly, on a sort of a more systemic and institutional level, they've made us smarter collectively. By virtue of being there and offering this research, they have a network of agency programs and individuals that they're working with them in the programs that they bring together. So those it creates sort of an institution for cross-agency collaboration and getting folks out of their silos and talking regularly about the research and what they're finding. Starting with implementation research. Actually, everybody in this room who starts new programs knows that the first year can be kind of messy. And if you take the outcomes just from the first year, you would think that, not only do things not work, you're actually hurting people because, you're slowing things down and there's great drags and you don't always see the positive improvements. And so the answer, in the short term is not only did it cost you a lot, you didn't get much. But you have to stick with it over time, and you really have to think about how to support people in implementation. So we do a lot of sort of implementation assistance and implementation evaluation to learn lessons of who made it happen really fast, who really dragged, and what were the different approaches, and what are some of the lessons that you can bring from that. Do this, avoid that. And then you move into evaluating the data and gathering the information and sharing the lessons. And here's the thing. It's about having the metrics, which can be, as you all know, because many of you are providing reports, which can be time-consuming. And can feel sometimes distracting. You're trying to do your day job, and you've got some researcher calling you saying, I need that report submitted now. But the value of that is that you have the data, and then gathering people to talk about the data. Because the researchers who sit in the room, back at their desks and at their computers playing with the data, they can see some things that maybe you don't see in the frontline operation. The flip side is the researchers don't understand the data as fully as those who are implementing the programs. So creating a regular coming together in conversation of the researchers and the implementers really brings a richness of understanding to that data. And so the center has just been a phenomenal force for our learning and for our professionalism. And all of the discussions about those individual initiatives has actually spilled out and over into the agency operations more broadly. And this is where I see sort of investing in a research and development capacity within a large organization. Now, my organization is pretty big, right? But your organizations are pretty big. And so individually at the nonprofit level, I would imagine this would have the same exact effect, which is by having that capacity and having those conversations, the lessons from the pilots that we are evaluating and the programs that we're starting to scale up start to spread out and infect the other programs of the agency, and both in terms of lessons of what doesn't work. I've seen programs start to fall into disfavor because the data's just not there. And to show what does work, you start to think about the lessons. So a great example on that one has been our investment in financial empowerment. So one of the ideas, this is in the addressing the working poor, is what are the things that we have to do to help those who are working to move up the income scale and out of poverty. And at this point, it's interesting because just as recently as 6 years ago, the concept of government getting involved in financial empowerment was radical. And folks are like, really? You're gonna teach people how to bank, and you're gonna help to support their tax credit returns and filings. You're gonna do them for them. You're gonna think about how training and credentials and further the skills certification can help them to move up in employment, and you're going to incentivize employers. It's like you're kind of messing with the market. That's not what you should be doing, right? And overcoming that resistance was really part of this conversation, but the way it was such a perfect match for us here in New York City, because with the Department of Consumer Affairs, we had an entity whose job it was to protect consumers against bad practices, and in this case, financial products that were abusive and took advantage of people without much resources, and knowing they don't have much resources and desperate, gouging them. And so using that arm of the department to protect consumers against poor banking practices, but also consumer advocacy, which was really doing things to advance good practices on behalf of the city and behalf of the consumers in improving skills around financial asset development. And we have enough evidence to know that people with assets, even poor people with assets, do better than poor people without assets in terms of weathering the storms and advancing. So we created a tiny little office, a couple of people, Office of Financial Empowerment, and started with, we thought, of course, we're social workers, so the first thing we think is, well, what they need is financial counseling, right? So we hired a bunch of counselors, and we sort of embedded them in neighborhood offices, and we sort of coached them about how to, you got to go down the block and open up a bank account, and we'd created some relationships with some banks. But that started observations and fuller knowledge into these practices, and started to develop some additional programs. So it moved on to Save NYC, which was an incentive program that when you get your EITC return, if you put it in the bank and you keep it in the bank, so that means put it in the bank. Number one, for half the people that means open a bank account. Put your money in and leave it there. You're looking at somebody who makes maybe $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year, and you're saying, we want you to put that $2,000 in the bank, and we want you to leave it there for a year. And if you can leave it there for a year, we will match you at the end of the year up to $500 for, it was a one-to-one match for the first 500 that went in and stayed in. I think that was what it was. And the idea there was, if we can help people not only open bank accounts, but get attached to their bank accounts, develop a loyalty as a customer to their bank accounts, that they can start to use that as a mechanism to really manage their household financial resources better. And in doing this, we also had conversations with the banks that we agreed to participate with to eliminate, there was a no-fee checking and no withdrawal penalties. And so we got rid of some, using the consumer advocacy side of our hat, some of those things that were really disadvantaging very poor people. And so that program was tremendously successful, done on a fairly modest scale here in New York City, but was one of those programs that we showed that people were able to do this, that they were able to achieve the match, and that they were managing. Now here's the thing, they were managing crisis in the household more effectively. They were less likely to miss a rental payment. They were less likely to have utilities cut off. And so we looked at a number of factors about, how are things faring in these households, and we had comparison group to look at. And we saw, we saw greater financial stability in the households. Too short of a time to know if we're seeing greater, and greater asset development, so they had more money in the bank, greater savings, it sort of goes to figure. What we're looking for, though, in the longer term that we need to continue to dive into is whether or not this has the goal of actually seeing household income, greater earnings, greater employment progress for those individuals. All that is background to this point. That investment and that program led to two things. First is that this is one of the programs that's being replicated nationally through the Social Innovation Fund, where we are I guess it's the only government recipient of the White House Innovation Fund, that the purpose of which was to find promising programs nationally and help in replication. And so we applied for the Social Innovation Fund and received that award 2 years ago. And we're scaling up 5 of our programs, and this is one of the 5. So the first is that by experimenting with this and trying it and doing what was at the time a seemingly radical concept, we were able to show some progress enough that it merits replication in other jurisdictions across the country. The second thing is that Office of Financial Empowerment has grown by leaps and bounds and has a much broader array of services that they're providing here in New York City, and it's evolved to this stage. Now, I keep telling Commissioner Mintz, Jonathan Mintz, that he's got to come up with a better phrase for this, but he calls it his super vitamin. He's like, Linda, this is great, the super vitamin. The super vitamin the concept is, instead of, remember back, that first thing we did is we set up, we created financial counselors, and we, in some cases, we actually, opened up a new storefront and put our financial counselors, maybe next door to a credit union or next door to a settlement house, but we created our own little offices. What we've discovered is that is a wasted resource. And the better way to do this, and the super vitamin concept, is you embed this financial empowerment conversation in all your other programs. It's not a separate strategy, a separate program. It's a component that should be present in every job training placement office, in every food stamp office, in every welfare office, that this concept of financial empowerment is so core and so essential that it really should be a conversation that's present in the hands of every worker that is coming into contact with a low-income person who's struggling to get by in order to help them to manage their resources better. So it's also the other evolution that we have out of this is from a carved-out, set-aside initiative to one that is more fully integrated into the sort of the bloodstream of that broad array of $20 billion we spend every year on social service interventions. So on Rikers, financial empowerment officers with the discharge planners on Rikers, everything that you can think of where you can embed this. All right, so I'm going to talk. There's so much fun given the topic of the conversation today, thinking about conditional cash transfers. But I'm going to skip over that, and I'm going to just end by thinking a little bit, and I'm going to say words that I don't really understand, but I think that they're areas that are really exciting for us collectively to think about. I'm in a university setting, so people are going to know this. But be honest, raise your hand if you know what Hadoop is. I love it. I know it. And Mahout. So these are the words of big data and business intelligence and artificial intelligence. Hadoop is it's apparently yesterday I was trying. This is on my mind because we were talking about it yesterday. I'm like, well, what is it? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? What is it? Right? And so it turns out Hadoop is a noun, but I don't know how a cloud can be a noun because you can't really touch it, right? So Hadoop is the repository for shared data. And it's basically an advance in technology that allows data that exists in our systems to go into one room with all the other data, and then magic happens, and they talk to each other, and then they tell you stuff. Well, they just talk to each other. They're there. The Hadoop is it's this room. We're in Hadoop. Apparently, it's Hadoop. It's not the Hadoop. It's Hadoop. Hadoop is It's the Hindi word for elephant. I'm not sure if it's what. It's not the Hindi word. We have somebody who's fluent in Hindi back here. No, it's not the Hindi word for. It's a word. It's an Eastern word for elephant. Okay, now Mahout. Mahout is the jockey. It's the whatever you call you call him the Mahout. The Mahout is the person who rides the elephant and tells the elephant what to do. So Mahout is the technology that actually comes in the room and orchestrates the data to organize itself in a way that it can tell you stuff. Now, I'm telling you all this just because I thought it was kind of funny. What I think we're on the brink of, and that I think that is going to be really exciting for us, is how we can use the advances in technology to dive into our data and open up our eyes. And I'm excited about this because I think it's going to tell us a lot of stuff about whether all of our, I think it has the potential of telling us whether the fundamental framework for our thinking is right or wrong, and offers the possibility to help us to discover new solutions to problems. There's a great, so here's the last thing. There's a great video. Has anybody ever seen the Dancing Bear video? Jay has seen it. Okay. So the Dancing Bear video, it says, it starts and it says, you're going to see a video, and I want you to tell me how many times the ball is passed among the participants, right? And so you go in, and then you go, all right, you watch the bouncing ball, and, people are throwing the ball, and the video's over, and you say, 12, 11, 13, 12, 13. And then it's like, well, did you see the dancing bear? And so then you look at the video again, and as people are throwing the ball, this 6-foot, 300-pound dancing bear is walking through the room like this, right? But when you're watching the bouncing ball, you don't see the dancing bear. And when you see it again, you're like, oh my God, how did I miss the dancing bear? So the point of it is, how can our data, when we have the effect of artificial intelligence to dig into our data, how many dancing bears are we going to find? We're so busy watching the ball. We have all of our random control assignment evaluation research, and we're looking at very specific things, and we're getting the data out. So that's watching the ball, and that's important because sometimes you really just need to keep the ball in the air. But to me, the exciting part is how many dancing bears are we going to find? And can we be smart enough to figure out how all this brilliance that's going on with technology and data management, and are we going to be able to apply that to our very messy social service data to learn new lessons? So that's what we're doing that. We're building what we call our Center for Innovation in Data Intelligence, CIDI, and we are right now I'm building a Hadoop. I don't know if that's the right. I'll figure it out. And it's all of your data. It's everything that you do on a day-to-day basis with your clients, and now we're going to have great opportunities to learn a lot more. See, and I even went on longer than I expected. Thank you. So Jay will keep the time, and we have plenty of time to talk, I think. Gail?
Can you talk about the failure? Can you speak about a failure, and then what happens when you fail, and why it's okay to fail and make mistakes and then move on? Yeah.
Well, I'll give you two examples. The first failure that I would point out is the disconnected youth. We funded about let's say probably 8 or 10 different initiatives, largely focused on re-engagement, focused on the reconnection to education and connection or reconnection to employment. And because we were focused on disconnected youth, it wound up also being a lot with individuals with criminal histories. And so with those programs, I would say roughly we have 2 or 3 that are showing some positive impact, 2 or 3 that are flat, and 2 or 3, well, actually, I'll be honest, 2 or 3 that didn't work, including one that, if you believe the random control, we actually produced worse outcomes for the individuals than the control group. Can you imagine, right? You know, if you start your day saying do no harm. And so in this, what we found, without going into, they typically were a casework management model that would involve either, and we have some providers in the room that were only involved in the ones that succeeded, that it would either be a connection to skills development and training, like a GED, a GED, or employment training, and our richest were a combination of that and subsidized employment, and education. Community service. Sort of blending together. It's about the skills. It's about the income, and it's about a sense of self-worth in the community that you live in. So that's a civic justice core. What we found is the failure was that the programs were not in the program that we discontinued. It basically shot too high. What we discovered is that the individuals we were trying to reach were not. We designed it in a way that didn't get to the kids we wanted to get to, and so it wound up inadvertently creating a program that was creaming the best, most skilled, most able, and the kids that we were really trying to connect to couldn't cut it. They were dropping out in droves. They wouldn't make it past the first week, and so out of that failure, so we discontinued that program, but we started a new program, a pre-GED program. We said our kids need training to be ready to take the GED. And again, this was so it's a lesson that came out of that, and now we've invested in pre-GED, and we've done it in partnership. We also found new partners. So we had settlement house partners and employment training partners, but we also have deepened our partnerships with the libraries, because we found that was a place that they're every few blocks, kids go there. They were and they're wildly receptive to this idea, so it was great. The other failure, this is a little dicey. Maybe folks in the room can help me out with this. You would, for the first 4 years of the Bloomberg administration, I was the homeless commissioner. And we set a whole range of things to change the way that the city was engaging the homeless population. And we set out a goal of reducing homelessness in the city by 2/3 over 5 years. And the failure in that is that the homeless population is about the same as when the plan was announced. So we did not reduce the homeless population. And it's interesting. Now, this is a little tough, and because I think that it's, on the one hand, I'm stunningly frustrated. I sit down. Seth Diamond, he's such a great commissioner. He's really thinking and working hard and trying new innovations, and it's just so stubbornly impervious to change in terms of the outcome. And so I think of it, when you think of it maybe as a public relations, and here's the important thing, is that you're always doing this in the bubble of working in the city for an elected official, oftentimes, sometimes more often than you expected, running for re-election, and you have to think about whether or not the success is going to implicate that next campaign. And so there are many who will say, gee, the mayor has been a failure on homelessness. And in terms of that goal that we set, yes. And so maybe a little bit of the lesson was that too bold of a goal? And you want to set your sights high. You want to really, set very aspirational goals. And I'm a little bit of the opinion, the opposite phrase is promise low, deliver high. I do the opposite. I'm sort of like promise high, because otherwise you're not going to know if you can get there. I'd rather shoot high and do your best to get there. Well, we shot high. The flip side of that story, though, is I think that we really generated a huge amount of change in that department that leaves it, yes, we still have very high levels of homelessness, 39,000 living in shelter now. At the same time, we have tremendous reforms in the system. Getting rid of just the horrendous family intake center and making that a much more humane process, having a much stronger ties of the homeless service system to our employment services system, so higher levels of individuals getting all the job training and child care support that comes with a deep engagement with the public assistance and job training system. The shelter conditions themselves, and moving to working with our providers around improving the engagement and delivery of shelter services. So it's a fundamentally stronger system, but on the public optics side, you have that challenge. Laurie.
So I know the private side of public-private partnerships, and I'm wondering if you could just spend a few minutes on what you think are the pros and cons of the public side of public-private partnerships, and if there are some areas where they work better than others.
Boy, I realize how spoiled we are in New York City, because we have so many incredibly generous foundations, including yours, Laurie, that have worked with the city. We just had our gathering of our SIF cities, the 8 cities that are doing replication. Wednesday and Thursday here in New York City, and they're like gaga over how many foundations that are working with us. And the thing that is great about that, should I get rid of this so you can see I just noticed this. Oh, we're installing now, sorry. Wrong button. You can see why they don't let me this. You wonder why I didn't have a PowerPoint. I think the benefit of working with foundations, number one, foundation dollars are fast and flexible. And you don't have to go through the city's procurement process, and you don't have to be bound by all of the state and federal regulations. You don't have to be bound by the 10 million lawyers and auditors and budget people that work for the city that are there to help. And so it's fast and flexible, and you can do new things really quick and really innovatively. Foundations bring tremendous resources, and I hear sort of the intellectual resources. They have smart staffs. that focus a lot on emerging trends, emerging ideas, and have the time to really and make it their business to know what are all the evidence, research, and evaluation going on in the field. So you sort of bring a library of conversation to the table. That helps. They add accountability, and so they not always want to pay for the evaluation, but really do they add accountability. They typically do like to partner with a strong evaluation, want to know if their investments are producing positive impacts, and are eager to get the evaluation research that will demonstrate that. And just by having a partner who asks, how's that thing going? You sort of have to remember how that thing is going. So you get an accountability just by reporting out on progress and having that routine conversation. They can be time-consuming partnerships. And sometimes they don't want to do exactly what you want to do. Sometimes they actually want to have an influence over how their money is spent, and so they meddle with your ideas, right? It's just like so you gotta be like kind of flexible. No. And I suppose that's it. And so I think that to have a successful public-private partnership, you've got to go in very much with an open mind of a collaborator building something together. And if you sort of have rigidity, you're not going to get many partners. But looking for those right matches and finding the right places to do that it takes time. I think if we didn't have and our CEO, it's really hard for agencies that are running programs to sustain the engagement with partners that's necessary in order to really make it work. And so for us, our CEO, and now the staff that we've brought on to advance the Young Men's Initiative, we have sort of that nerve center of individuals whose job it is to coordinate, and that adds sort of a solid partner for foundations to work with. They become a known entity. It becomes a more regular event, and it makes it easier and sort of facilitates that. But they're just really, really tremendous. I actually think that the work that we've done on with the experimentation, which a lot of the CEO and now the Young Men's Initiative is, wouldn't have happened as robustly, certainly not as widely, but certainly not as robustly as it has happened by virtue of having all these partnerships. Sir, I'm sorry.
Good morning. My name's Alex Forrester. I run a nonprofit organization called Rising Tide Capital. And in a nutshell, we work on the education side of microfinance for low-income entrepreneurs. And I really appreciated your comments. Very interested over the past 8 years in being able to calculate social return on investment calculations, because one component of program evaluation is whether it works. The other component is it worth the investment that is made? And I'm curious whether any of the research you're doing and the Hadoop and Mahut is enabling the city to identify what, in a corollary to the reentry field, where we know that we spend $33,000 a year per inmate and that we have a 70% recidivism rate, so there's a very clear return on investment. Is there a return on investment that you're beginning to see that enables us to understand what the social cost of poverty or the working poor is? Yeah,
that's such a great question. And I think the honest answer is that we haven't been that great about it. I'm really excited about something new that we're working on, which is this concept of a social impact bond. And the idea is that you have, and it works best. It's a private investment to front load dollars for innovative interventions, typically sort of further upstream, more prevention, that will give rise to savings in high-end costs, typically residential institutional type costs, the savings of which are sufficient to pay for the upfront investment and institutionalize the new program intervention over time. And so at the end, what you get is a better structure of programs. But you solve the problem that all the money is currently trapped in the institution, so you have no money to get it started. Now, but this is the whole concept, is that this investment, that sounds an awful lot like foundation grant. The difference here is that the investment is to be repaid. So it's not a bond. It's not a promise of repayment. It's not a guarantee of repayment. It's a loan, a social impact loan. It's a high risk venture capital kind of thing, where if it works and your evidence shows that it works by metrics that the term sheet that says, if you get these things, the money goes back. The hope is that it'll unleash a great deal of new investment capital for these interventions. There's one social impact bond now in the UK. It's in Peterborough Prison, and it's an intervention focused on reducing recidivism. So we're looking at this here in New York City, and looking and not. There's big reasons why the criminal justice area is the area that is going to be most fruitful here, and that is because it's mostly city dollars that pay for our jails. Very little state and federal money in the jail, our custody and control management system, and so. What that means is that if we save, we capture all those city dollars and we have them for repayment. So if we did this, maybe in homelessness, half of the money is, and a family shelter is state money. So we only save half of the dollars, and that may not be enough to invest in the alternative, right? So that's another, another thing to pass is actually doing a city, state, federal social impact bond. But starting with just the city piece. All of this is a big lead up to answer your question, which is that it is bringing a rigor to the cost-benefit analysis of our work in a way that all our other evaluation stuff has not done. And it's interesting, our evaluation stuff has overwhelmingly been about social outcomes. Did you increase employment? Did you increase education? Did you increase earnings? It's all about the social outcome indicator and whether or not that individual has improved in their status. It is rarely. Sometimes when you go to OMB, you make this case about how it's going to save money, and you fight, and then you finally wear them down, and they say okay, but they don't come back and say, did it save money? There's not a process in place to really be rigorous in evaluating that, unless you come back and say more, and then you have to sort of jerry-rig it so that you can prove that it saved money. What this is, it really adds stunning rigor, probably more rigor than is necessary for most programs, but it adds stunning rigor to that question of, was the investment, did you have a city dollar taxpayer bottom line payoff in terms of the benefit? So that's an answer from the city point of view, from the city budget point of view. And I think it's really important because I think if we can get better at doing that, then we, as a field of public administrators, can have more success in convincing our budget office of making good investments. You can take that a step further then. And the Vera Institute is one that's really creating this model now very robustly to look more broadly at not just the city tax savings, but broader savings from the individual point of view. So they look, for instance, when they assess an anti-crime initiative, and they look at whether or not there's recidivism. I stop at whether or not that recidivism led to fewer jail days, led to savings. They go on to say, did that how many fewer victims? What are the economic costs to individuals of being a victim of a crime? And costing out more broadly throughout all stages of sort of civil life, where can we quantify the benefits of that crime reduction? And so I think this is, my hope is, I actually hope that the social impact bond model becomes a viable model and that it can be used more broadly. I think it's not going to have total, sometimes things are just going to cost money and you should do them because they're the right thing to do. So not everything should be justified because you can save taxpayer dollars. But for those that can, I think it's a great way of opening up more partnerships and more resources. And just like the CEO created this greater sort of conversation and knowledge about what works and what doesn't with spillover effects into the programs, I think the social impact bond conversation will make us broadly more thoughtful about cost-benefit analysis in government programs.
My name is Jim Madison. I'm a representative of the early childhood education universe, something that's been in the papers quite a bit lately. One of your three targeted areas was early childhood education, an area that you acknowledge there is much research that shows it works in breaking the cycle of poverty. And on the last point you make, there is extensive research coming out of Chicago and other places that indicates for every dollar invested in early childhood education, the returns, depending upon the program, are between $7 and $17 to society over the course of the life of the individual. So you know what my question is going to be. Why has this mayor chosen to cut the number of children in early childhood education by approximately 40% at this point?
Okay, there's so many answers. The city funding actually has been making up a lot for state and federal cuts, and basically the question is that has confounded us is how do we keep filling in for reductions in state and federal funding, and how far can we go? And there's more. I actually want to come back to that at the end. A couple of things, like good news and bad news, good things and bad things, and so I'll try to be as sort of straightforward and forthcoming as possible. Great example of this quandary is nurse-family partnership. Try to get your budget office to expand nurse-family partnership. You can say, you know what, if you spend $1 now, in 2030, you're going to save $17. And the budget office will look at their 4-year financial plan with a $3 billion gap next year, and they'll say, go talk to somebody else, right? So one thing, and I think sometimes our real budget argument problem with early childhood work is that we know it works, and you have to wait 25 years, right? And by definition, for all of the tensions that play out in budget making and budget creation, that is not a successful argument in give me the money now. Hang on, I'll come back. The second thing is it's been painful. It's been really painful presiding over the budgets. And you asked me the early child care. It's also the out of school time. Those are our two big investments in out of school time tends to focus on elementary school age kids and high school kids, but the early child care stuff, if it was up to me, rather than serving only 22% of the eligible kids, we'd be serving 100% of the eligible kids, right? Turn that into an appropriation, right? And so let's sort of just for a second put that aside. I do think, and I actually know from talking to many of you about this, we have a huge transformation going on in our early childhood work in New York City with the Early Learn RFP. This has been just a stunning effort to bring together the Head Start, Child Care, and Pre-K programs, two of them in one agency, siloed as if they were different agency, and then Pre-K, of course, over at the DOE. And the community providers offering these programs needing to deal with the three management of the programs as if they were totally separate countries, right? The rules, the process, the qualifications, the certification, the standards, the training, the student-teacher ratios, the what you serve at what time, all different standards, and the nonprofits who are struggling to make ends meet have to manage all these different things. So the Early Learn RFP has brought all of those together into a single standardized format that is at the same time as it's standardizing, streamlining, simplifying, also embracing best practices in early child care and learning. And I recognize it is not the souped-up Cadillac model. Maybe I don't drive a car, so I don't know what a good sturdy standard economy car is. But it's the good standard sturdy economy form of best child care practices, and hopefully very streamlined and improved for the nonprofits that do the work. So I think of that as a huge reform that's an incredible transition of a foundation base for early child care and learning in New York that will have a truly transformational effect. Now the goal is that you want that to be as well funded as possible, and that's the budget battle that we're in now. I have to say I have never seen the community organize more effectively around an issue than the community has organized around childcare and out of school time this year, and I think it's going to have a big effect by the time the budget negotiations are over. And so I know, I can't be on the steps of City Hall with you, but I certainly hope you're there. Because you need to use everything you've done to organize that campaign to make it as robust as possible through the upcoming weeks. Now, do you want? Is that? I didn't. You did.
The city has $2 billion in its education. The city has $2 billion in its education budget for special needs kids and categorizes 175,000 of them as special needs, which is way out of proportion for what things should be. The savings would be immediate. If you get children arriving in kindergarten and first grade prepared, they will not be labeled special needs kids, and they will stay mainstream and have a very different course of life. And my favorite statistic, which I just heard the other day, is that the city arrests 45,000 16 and 17-year-olds who are primarily high school dropouts.
So on the special needs, I couldn't agree more, and we're actually trying hard to see if there are both the assessment tools and interventions that could be introduced, and some collaborations with the DOE that hopefully can make a difference in that. I agree completely. No more questions. All right. Sorry, Joanne, no more questions.